Chapter 141, Camp. This chapter is updated by novels.pl. No need, High Mage Hog. You are an important pillar of the Cloud Tower. If you remain in Thousand Sails City for too long, won't Sir Dewey look for me to settle the debt? Although Lin Yun said these words very politely, even carrying a hint of flattery, the rejection was very clear. Honestly, if Hog wasn't a 9th rank High Mage, Lin Yun might have really wanted him to remain in Thousand Sails City, because he had already noticed that this Hog was truly trying his best to curry favor with him. As for the reasons, Lin Yun could guess a few. It could be his shocking computing ability, or the admiration Sir Dewey had for him. In short, Lin Yun was convinced that as long as he said something to that effect, Hog would remain in Thousand Sails City and become the strongest firepower of the Gilded Rose. But unfortunately, Hog was already a 9th rank High Mage, and this was too troublesome for Lin Yun. Hog wasn't Fail or William. Although he could support him with his considerable power, Lin Yun couldn't feel relieved with him around. This might sound strange. Lin Yun could be at ease with Fail and William, but why not with Hog? The reason was quite simple. Lin Yun didn't have the strength to contend with a 9th rank High Mage at the moment. He had too many secrets. Whether it was the Prince Tomb or the Bone Plane, either of those would be enough to make an Archmage crazy with envy. If someone acted up because of that, Lin Yun would directly get rid of him, but if Hog decided to raise hell, Lin Yun wouldn't have the ability to take care of him. No matter how powerful he was, what use was there in a helper he didn't feel safe with? Hog seemed very regretful after being turned down by Lin Yun. Then I'll go back to Cloud Tower, but Merlin, if the Watson family still dares to come, you must tell me. Even if I cannot help you, I'll let Sir Dewey know. I'm telling you, Merlin, Sir Dewey admires you very much. You must use this opportunity carefully. Before leaving rather unwillingly, Hog gave Lin Yun some advice. Of course, Lin Yun agreed while sending Hog off. After leaving the reception room, Lin Yun addressed William. Call all the 5th rank mages over at once. This time, William had learned even more about Maffa. In the last hour, he had seen his own great mage cousin beat up a 1st rank High Mage, and had also seen a 9th rank High Mage trying to curry favor in every way possible. Those were High Mages, people that could decide the life and death of a great mage without the slightest bit of effort. But they were nothing in front of his cousin. William had been thoroughly stunned when watching all of that unfold. Only when Lin Yun called out to him did he recover and then promptly rushed to gather the 55th rank mages. If it had been before, William would still have had some doubts regarding the future of these 50 mages. Now, William was thoroughly convinced that his cousin would have a way to make them advance to the Great Mage realm in a short time. No certain grounds, no sure reasons. But William believed it. Fail soon arrived with 6 mining puppets. William brought the 55th rank mages. After this group was gathered, they left for Lin Yun's home. The array was activated, and the space nearby distorted once again. The planar path leading to the Bone Plane was opened by Lin Yun once more. But Lin Yun wasn't alone this time. A full team was behind him. 2 great mages, 6 mining puppets, and 55th rank mages. Although the overall strength wasn't anything to brag about, the group still looked imposing. Naturally, no one in the team aside from Lin Yun could bother caring about this at the moment. The change in the environment had completely terrified them. That included William, the scion of the Merlin family, as well as Fail from the Black Horn auction house. Even though the background of these two wasn't insignificant, it was still the first time they had experienced a planar path. Among them, William Merlin was still a bit better. After all, a major force like the Merlin family should have at least one plane in their hands, or else they wouldn't have enough resources to support their development. Although William didn't have the qualifications to enter the plane, he had heard some things from the elders of the family. But Fail had never heard anything about this before. And there was no need to mention those remaining 5th rank mages. With their strength, they wouldn't even have the power to talk in the Merlin family, let alone coming into contact with the planar path. The entire team was startled for a while after setting foot on the Black Wasteland, and it was chaotic for a while. But fortunately, after William sent a glance at Lin Yun, he managed to recover his calmness. He relied on the prestige he had amassed over the course of his time here to regain control over the team. "This is the training ground I promised you." Lin Yun walked in front of the team and started talking. "What you have to do now is protect these 6 mining puppets so that they can work without being disturbed. It may take several months, but I can guarantee that the weakest among you will still be able to become first-rank great mages. Those that work hard might even reach as far as the 5th rank." With Lin Yun's words, the worried team managed to calm down. They were skeptical at first, but then all their mages had fervent expressions on their faces. There was an issue with these 50 mages being sent to Thousand Sails City. It could be said that at least 80% of them would never have the opportunity to enter the great mage ranks. Otherwise, the Merlin family wouldn't have been so generous as to send so many of them to Thousand Sails City. A group of 5th rank mages with little hope of further advancement suddenly hearing that as long as they put in some effort, they could even become 5th rank great mages. How would they feel? Moreover, the one who said this wasn't anyone. He was the boss of the Gilded Rose, a great mage who had just dealt with a high mage. At this time, the whole team became lively and the 50 mages even forgot their surroundings as well as the undead life forms visible all around. Lin Yun's speech was truly too dull. There were no exciting feelings, no bewitching suggestions, no hidden meanings. The benefits and threats were all out on the open. But it gave hope to these 50 mages. These 50 mages full of enthusiasm soon set up a simple camp near the planar path. Simple, but not crude. This was Lin Yun's special requirement, because this camp would become the first stronghold of the Mercury mercenary group's attempt to seize the Bone Plain in the future. The camp consisted of a bonfire, a few tents, and a fence made of stakes and iron wire. There were also 2 temporary sentry posts put together in the east and west. Although the sentry posts weren't guarded, they both had mage eyes as well as a flamerate to sound the alarm. The Black Death Rune was floating in the center of this camp, hovering a distance from the ground. And the drifting soul fires within our radius of about a kilometer were already being sucked in and transformed into mana by the Black Death Rune before being stored in the newly built camp. If someone could see the mana flowing. At this moment, the mana was flowing in thread by thread from the Black Death Rune. The threads were like hazy mists, drifting between the 2 sentry posts, not dissipating, not spreading far. This was the best way of using the Black Death Rune. Under the effect of the matching alchemy array, the mana condensed by the Black Death Rune would reach a frightening concentration. Meditating and fighting within that area would be like drinking liquid mana. What was the growth of a magic tool incarnation in comparison? Unfortunately, the Cloud Tower would only understand all of this a millennium later. After the Black Death Rune started operating, the Bone Plain's first stronghold truly became lively. Fail controlled the 6 alchemy puppets and started the mining of the Nether Iron Vein. William Merlin started confronting the scattered skeleton warriors with the 50 mages. Every collapsed skeleton warrior would lead to a soul fire being absorbed by the Black Death Rune before being transformed into mana, and that mana would spread in the camp. After confirming that he hadn't forgotten anything, Lin Yun left the camp. Although Lin Yun didn't say much, he actually cared a lot about these 50 mages. This was his first batch of subordinates. Moreover, they were subordinates that he could trust completely. Before they entered the Bone Plain, they had all signed contracts personally prepared by Lord Sean. Lord Sean was very ruthless, and even Lin Yun couldn't bear to look straight at them. The contents of these contracts weren't so great, but it could be said that Lin Yun was taking responsibility. Basically, these 5th rank mages had already signed their next generation, the one after that, and the 3rd one to the Gilded Rose. In any case, as a 5th rank great mage with undead predator, no skeleton warrior dared to stop Lin Yun after he left the camp. That overbearing pressure was something they could feel when they were within 100 meters of him, making them flee for their lives. Chapter 142, Undead Eldritch Rient. This chapter is updated by Novels.pl. Lin Yun soon reached the edge of the Black Wasteland as his path was completely unhindered, and he found the alchemy puppet hunting skeleton warriors. "I wonder how much it harvested." Lin Yun softly muttered a control rune, and the pursuing alchemy puppet let go of its target to rush over to Lin Yun like a hunting dog. Before the puppet even reached him, Lin Yun could already feel a thick death aura surrounding it. He knew that this was due to it carrying a large number of soul essences for a long time. It looked like the harvest of the alchemy puppet over the course of the last 2 months wasn't small. When the puppet reached him, Lin Yun used a control rune to open the spatial array storage on the puppet's arm. Sure enough, it held a great many soul essences, over 3,000 at the very least. If he were to put them on Thousand Sales City's market, it would create a lot of chaos. Not bad. Lin Yun nodded, feeling pleased. This harvest had gone beyond his expectations. At first, Lin Yun thought that the puppet would be able to collect at most 1,000 soul essences in the Black Wasteland. But unexpectedly, the harvest was triple that amount. From this, it could be seen how fertile the bone plain was. Lin Yun whispered a control rune, making the puppet stay alert while he piled the soul essences on the ground before taking out the Sage Chapter. After Lin Yun's mana input, a dazzling light blossomed from the Sage Chapter, releasing shocking death energy, covering a radius of 10 meters. That small pile of soul essence on the ground resonated with the shocking death energy. Only a glimmer could be seen at first, but then, the glimmer gradually shone brighter and brighter. Finally, the dark soul essences turned into dazzling soul fires. Due to those several thousand shining soul fires, Lin Yun's location shone like a sun. Then, the Sage Chapter's light fluttered, and the several thousand soul fires became like moths attracted to the flame. They threw themselves into the Sage Chapter one after the other. 1, 10, 100. More and more soul fires came pouring into the Sage Chapter, and in a short period of time, it had absorbed several hundreds of soul fires. Lin Yun could clearly feel that this shocking quantity of soul fires brought some kind of transformation to the Sage Chapter. After all this influx, the originally dim stone tablet looked like a sun emitting rays of sunshine. The Sage Chapter would become brighter every time it absorbed a soul fire. After absorbing several thousands of soul fires, the Sage Chapter was now sparkling and translucent, like a crystal. It should have evolved. Lin Yun grabbed it and looked at it. He could clearly feel a huge amount of death energy flowing within the Sage Chapter. It was several times more powerful than before. Lin Yun considered for a moment and then tried to store a second deer spell, Frost Ring, in the Sage Chapter. And it indeed worked. It really evolved. The previous Sage Chapter could only store first tier spells. After first tier spells became ultimate spells, their might would be comparable to that of a 4th tier spell. In other words, they would reach the level of a 5th rank Great Mage. But now, the Sage Chapter could store 2nd tier spells. After 2nd tier spells became ultimate spells, they would reach the level of a 5th tier spell, raising the power of the ultimate spells he could use from that of a 5th rank Great Mage to that of a 1st rank High Mage. This wasn't a small upgrade. Except for a monster like Lin Yun, the gap between a 5th rank Great Mage and a 1st rank High Mage was almost insurmountable. But now, these several thousand soul fires directly made the Sage Chapter able to break through that huge chasm. It could be said that the current Sage Chapter was several times stronger than it had been before. The only regret was that the number of ultimate spells that could be stored was still the same as before, 3. Well, 3 is more than enough. After consoling himself, Lin Yun stored 2 other second tier spells. He then took the alchemy puppet and headed out of the Black Wasteland. Half an hour later, Lin Yun entered a dense forest. The seemingly dense forest looked verdant and lush, brimming with life, but it also felt sinister and oppressive. A bloody smell filled the forest. Lin Yun was pretty sure that this was the famous Blood Forest. Towering trees spread everywhere within sight. But in reality, the trees and weeds were frightening, blood-sucking monsters. Sure enough, a sharp hissing sound echoed by Lin Yun's ears just as he entered the forest. The originally verdant grass spun in a split second, and countless sharp, thorny vines rushed to try to coil around Lin Yun's legs like snakes. But since Lin Yun dared to enter the Blood Forest, he would obviously have countermeasures. Lin Yun incanted as soon as he saw movement. A flame path was cast and only a bang was heard as flames rose under Lin Yun's feet. Those sharp vines didn't have time to coil around his legs before being turned into ashes. Lin Yun didn't even bother to look down as he kept walking with the puppet towards the depths of the forest, leaving a path of fire behind him. He didn't stop incanting on the way, a dazzling flame spreading out from the elemental amber of his spiritual magic staff. Lin Yun knew that the Blood Forest wasn't an ordinary place. This place was inhabited by undead vegetation, and although the weeds and underbrush were strangely sinister, their fighting strength was comparable to that of skeleton warriors. The true danger came from the tall undead treants with heights reaching up to 100 meters. The strongest ones had power similar to that of the previous Bone Devil. And furthermore, there wouldn't be just one or two undead treants in the Blood Forest. Just as some shrub burned to ashes, Lin Yun felt the earth shake under his feet. He heard the sound of things breaking behind him, and the first things he saw when he turned to check were branches as thick as arms and legs, ruthlessly whipping over at him. Fortunately, Lin Yun was prepared for this. When he heard that sound, Lin Yun chanted the last part of his incantation. A flash was emitted from the elemental amber and the pyroclasm that had been prepared for a long time was instantly cast. This was a 4th-tier spell, and after merging with the magic array, it had become so powerful that even a high mage like Alan Watson wouldn't dare to take it head-on, not to mention an undead treant that wasn't even 20 meters tall. A loud explosion thundered out as the dazzling flames landed on the undead treant just before the branches reached Lin Yun. A cracking sound then echoed as the entire undead treant was blasted in two from the middle. Those branches turned into cinder in instants, not leaving any trace on Lin Yun's clothes. But Lin Yun didn't dare to stop, because he knew that he had already alarmed the undead treants of the Blood Forest. This was only the beginning. He would have to face tens to hundreds of them. Sure enough, after snapping that undead treant in two, the ground didn't stop shaking. In a blink, 5 undead treants had burst out, and it looked like there were many more behind. Damn, I knew it. Facing such a large number of undead treants, Lin Yun couldn't help but bitterly smile. Lin Yun wouldn't hold back. He didn't dare to. After whispering a control rune, the Gygus Battlemage model puppet immediately entered all-out firepower mode, and the gold essence spear in its hand carried a dazzling flame as it rushed towards the undead treants. As for Lin Yun, he raised his casting speed to its limit and using his 5 magic arrays, he cast spell after spell, leveling almost all the land in 100 meters around him. Half an hour into the battle, there were no fewer than 100 undead treant corpses in front of and behind Lin Yun as his mana was getting depleted. The puppet was covered in wounds, but the undead treant's offensive was also slowly getting sluggish. Lin Yun was panting when the final undead treant fell to the ground. There was not a single treant left standing, and within a few hundred meters, the brush and weeds had all been turned into ashes. This had become a scorched land, a bit desolate even compared to the Bone Devil's territory. Lin Yun couldn't do much about it at this time. He looked for a clean location and sat down, using the elemental ambering to recover his mana while ordering the puppet to search the area. Because Lin Yun had read that after these undead treants died, they would leave behind the life crystals. Although life crystals didn't contain a lot of mana, the magic material had a wide range of uses in potioneering. Life crystals containing a large amount of life power were most suitable for compounding 2 kinds of potions, recovery-type potions and berserk-inducing potions. Moreover, Lin Yun still remembered a recipe from the library that could make the effects of these life crystals reach an incredible level. In truth, there were 3 shortcuts leading to the Book of Death. Lin Yun chose this one because besides being safe enough, this path would also give him the opportunity to harvest the undead treants of the Blood Forest. Chapter 143, Giant Blood Tree. This chapter is updated by novels.pl. By the time the puppet finished gathering the spoils of war, Lin Yun's mana had almost fully recovered. Looking at his harvest, there were about 30 life crystals. This was a good drop rate. The larger the undead elder treant, the easier it would be for it to condense a life crystal. Most of the undead elder treants that Lin Yun destroyed were 20 to 30 meters tall. Only a few among them had reached the standards for the condensation of life crystals, so it was already pretty good to get around 30 of them. Lin Yun put these 30 life crystals into his pocket, and after ordering the puppet to follow him, he went through the several hundred meters of scorched earth to set out for the depths of the Blood Forest. On the way, there were still endless numbers of the undead elder treants that were 20 to 30 meters tall. Occasionally, he would even meet one or two that towered over 50 meters. But fortunately, Lin Yun already possessed 5 magic arrays. At the same time, he had 2 spiritual magic tools in hand. He was over 10 times stronger than when he had first entered the bone plane. The battle puppet was opening the path ahead with its gold essence spear. Lin Yun, with his lava dominator in one hand and the spiritual magic staff in the other, looked like a lumberjack as he killed his way to the center of the Blood Forest. After reaching the center of the forest, Lin Yun could clearly feel the pressure increasing. The tallest undead elder treants of the Blood Forest were all in this location, some of them 60 to 70 meters tall. Although Lin Yun would still be able to deal with them, it would clearly be too strenuous. Moreover, Lin Yun knew that behind these undead elder treants, there was a truly powerful existence waiting for him. And he had no choice but to face this truly powerful existence. This was inevitable, as the origin of the Blood Forest's power all came from the undead elder treant's ancestor. That was the giant blood tree. A terrifying tree born alongside the bone plane. If Lin Yun wanted to get the Book of Death through this shortcut method, he would have to destroy the giant blood tree. Strange, an hour later, the number of life crystals in Lin Yun's pocket had already passed 200. At the same time, he had already walked to the core area of the Blood Forest. The soil was dark red as if it had been dyed with blood. A thick smell of iron wafted through the air, making anyone standing here feel as if they had been covered in bloody mud. The surroundings were empty. Not to mention undead elder treants, there was not even a trace of any weeds nearby. This was quite normal. The giant blood tree could be said to be the ancestor of the undead elder treants, the source of power of the Blood Forest. There would be not a single soul in the area where the giant blood tree was rooted. But there was something wrong. Lin Yun looked for a long time, but he didn't find the giant blood tree. What's going on? Lin Yun was somewhat stunned. Nearly all the materials he'd read described the giant blood tree as a colossus that towered several hundred meters in height, its treetop piercing through the sky, its roots reaching deep under the ground. Each sway would lead to a whirling gale, and its anger would cause earthquakes. Is it an illusion? Lin Yun's heart suddenly tightened. He hurriedly cast Spirit Defense. Now, the Spirit Defense had already been merged into Lin Yun's magic arrays, and with the buff of the Soul Walker on his left ring finger, it could be said that Lin Yun's Spirit Defense already reached the high mage level both in mind and soul. Strange, this isn't an illusion. Lin Yun didn't feel any change after casting his Spirit Defense spell, which suggested that this was all real. The giant blood tree truly didn't exist. Lin Yun now had a heavy expression. He cast 2 mage eyes and searched the area of dark red soil within a kilometer. Nothing, nothing. Still nothing. How could this happen? Lin Yun couldn't calm down. In ordinary circumstances, not finding the giant blood tree after entering the Blood Forest would be cause for joy, since he wouldn't need to fight it to the bitter end. But it was different right now. Lin Yun had entered the Blood Forest this time specifically for the shortcut for obtaining the Book of Death. He clearly remembered that only by destroying the blood tree would he be able to get the blood heart. It not only was the crystallization of the blood tree's power, but also the life source of all undead elder treants. The life energy contained within was enough to regenerate the Blood Forest in an instant. And only this level of life energy could be enough to make countless ghosts gather and cause the river of 10,000 ghosts to appear. At that time, he would be able to follow the river of 10,000 ghosts up until the Book of Death's resting place. This should have been a perfect plan, but the first part of his plan, the giant blood tree, was missing. This meant that the rest of his plan would be void. In these circumstances, how could Lin Yun remain calm? Wait, Blood Forest apostrophe. After thinking for a while, Lin Yun's eyes shone. That's right, it was the Blood Forest. The undead Elder Treant on his way hadn't felt as powerful as he'd expected. The tallest undead Elder Treant only approached 100 meters, after all, and its power had been far from comparable with the Bone Devils. This didn't look like the Blood Forest mentioned in the notes. Moreover, he could feel that this forest was in a dormant state. Only after dealing with the first undead Elder Treant did he meet with a large assault. Didn't this mean that the giant blood tree was slumbering? It was actually easy to test this. Rumble. Lin Yun moved the spiritual magic staff in his hand, his magic arrays quickly activating as the elemental shock blast formation was used. In a flash, several dozen meters around him were overturned. Rocks and soil were flung in all directions, as overbearing power radiated from him. But Lin Yun didn't plan to stop. The magic arrays were spinning crazily as one elemental shock blast after the other was cast. The mana surging was like a flood that couldn't be restrained. The loud noises following each elemental shock blast kept echoing, and the dark red soil within a kilometer was tossed about. By the time the 17th elemental shock blast was cast, the earth finally started shaking from below as hundreds of branches that were as thick as a grown man's waist drilled out of the ground like pythons. Among the swirling soil and dust smoke, these thick branches gouged their way through the dark red soil. It could be seen that each one was long enough to easily pierce through 100 meters of soil. Afterwards, a rumbling noise grew louder and louder. When Lin Yun felt something wrong, he poured mana into the Lava Dominator and instantly activated that blazing pair of wings to take off into the sky. From his new vantage point, Lin Yun could see a colossus rising up from the ground. The Lava Dominator's wings flew fast enough that they could already contend with Lin Yun under elemental incarnation. But at this moment, the speed of the wings was far from enough to compare to the speed at which the colossus sprung up from the ground. Lin Yun only managed to fly several dozen meters into the air when that colossus already reached his height. Shit! Lin Yun was startled. In that situation where it was nearly impossible to escape, he flapped his pair of flaming wings in a manner that almost defied physics and forced himself to dodge at a sharp angle. Almost at the same time, a dozen shadows fiercely thrust over, brushing past Lin Yun's body. A cold sweat trickled down his back at this time. These branches of the giant blood tree all struck with power similar to that of an all-out attack from the Bone Devil. A dozen of them attacking at the same time was as frightening as a dozen Bone Devils attacking at the same time. If not for his reaction speed, allowing him to promptly change his position, he would have already been turned into a honeycomb by these branches. Before the cold sweat could even dry up, the dozen branches sharply turned in the sky and charged once again at Lin Yun. The sound of the sharp turnaround made his heart freeze. He cursed while pouring a shocking amount of mana into the Lava Dominator. By relying on the surge of mana, the fast pair of flaming wings became even faster and carried Lin Yun out of danger, escaping from the pursuit of the dangerous branches. But the giant blood tree had already risen to the surface, and Lin Yun could clearly see it now. This enormous colossus was just like he had imagined it from those notes. Just the huge treetop covered 100-meter area. The countless branches were like pythons, attacking with stifling force. Lin Yun could understand with a glance that this giant blood tree's might was close to that of a 6th or 7th rank high mage. If he fought it head-on, he would definitely die. The only thing he could rely on was the Lava Dominator in his hands. Only the pair of flaming wings could allow him to stay in the sky and fight with this colossus. This was why he chose this shortcut. Lin Yun also knew about the dark red soil under the giant blood tree. The Blood Earth was the place the giant blood tree was born in. After countless years, it had long since turned into a part of the giant blood tree. If he carelessly stepped on it, he would immediately be like a fly stuck in a spider web, and the giant blood tree would drain all his blood with a mere thought. Chapter 144, Advantages and Disadvantages. This chapter is updated by novels.pl. Lin Yun knew that he could only fight the giant blood tree when flying in the sky. This was his only advantage, and at the same time, it was the only disadvantage of the giant blood tree. In fact, the python-like branches with the strength of Bone Devils were the weakest part of the giant blood tree. After all, that was the only physical attack that could track a target. No matter how fierce, no matter how fast, there would always a way to contend with it. The only thing it could work together with would be the poison fog released by the tree's trunk. But if he fell to the ground, the giant blood tree would be invincible, at least as far as Lin Yun was concerned. At that time, he would have to face the Blood Earth, as well as a huge and terrifying force of the countless undead elder treants the giant blood tree would summon. As for those sharp roots that could drill out of the ground at any time, that was only one of the giant blood tree's simple attacks. Thus, the only thing Lin Yun could do now was to finish the battle in the sky. He had to remain vigilant every single second. If the lava dominator's flaming wings dissipated, Lin Yun would have no choice but to withdraw from the area with the Blood Earth, and even withdraw from the Blood Forest. Otherwise, he simply wouldn't be able to break away from the giant blood tree's pursuit. Lin Yun pushed his mana control to its pinnacle, and with his finesse, the flaming wings felt like another part of his body. Fast, nimble, and quick-witted, he managed to forcibly break away from some certain death traps while simultaneously casting spell after spell at the body of the giant blood tree. There was even a second-tier ultimate spell among those. The might of that second-tier ultimate spell might already reach the level of a high mage's spells, and even the giant blood tree would suffer heavy losses under such a bombardment. In just a few minutes, the giant blood tree's trunk was already riddled with scars. Even the movement of those python-like branches was more sluggish than before. It seemed like Lin Yun had the upper hand. But Lin Yun knew that this would only be temporary. The fight had been going for about 5 minutes. In this time, he had pushed his mana control to the limit and even cast a second-tier ultimate spell. But the injuries that the giant blood tree had suffered were far from enough. In the end, the lava dominator's flame wings could only be materialized for 10 minutes, so if he couldn't take down the giant blood tree in the next 5 minutes, he would lose his only advantage. At that time, the flame wings would start disappearing and he would have no other choice but to flee in defeat and try again later. Lin Yun knew that he didn't have that much time left. The giant blood tree never left the kilometer-wide area of Blood Earth because this was the giant blood tree's birthplace, as well as its source of power. In the remote demon era, the Earth Demon Hess stood on this soil, and his boundless power would forever remain within it. Lin Yun was very clear about the fact that unless the giant blood tree left the dark red soil, his chances of victory were probably less than 10%. Do I really have to come back again? Lin Yun didn't have much time left. His flame wings would last at most 5 more minutes before dissipating. He was thinking hard, but he couldn't come up with their way to make the giant blood tree leave the Blood Earth. Branch after branch swung at Lin Yun, and it felt like an inescapable net was being woven as he controlled the flame wings to dodge through the narrow cracks while trying to form a feasible plan. The seconds slowly ticked by. Soon, half of the remaining 5 minutes had passed. By this time, Lin Yun had tried a couple different times to make the giant blood tree leave that dark red soil, but unfortunately, all his ideas failed. Although the giant blood tree was an undead plant life form, its level of intelligence was most likely higher than that of the Bone Devil. How could it not know the importance of remaining on the Blood Earth? As time slowly ran out, Lin Yun started to feel some despair. Not to mention the fact that the giant blood tree was refusing to leave the dark red soil. Even if he found a way to force it out, he still wouldn't have enough time to drag the battle over a kilometer to leave the area of influence. Unless he had a frightening power on the scale of the Death Garden, able to create a completely independent world. This somewhat ridiculous thought gave a reminder to Lin Yun. It's possible. Yes. He didn't have the power of the Death Garden, able to create an independent world. But he could destroy. However, it was a bit risky. But at this time, Lin Yun couldn't worry about that. After escaping from another encirclement, Lin Yun didn't make any counterattacks. Instead, he used the fact that the branch had yet to withdraw to get the flame wings to fly him towards the giant blood tree. In order to go faster, Lin Yun even used the elemental incarnation form that he had kept aside as a precautionary life-saving measure. With the flame wings on his back and elemental incarnation active, he could cast Flame Flash without restrictions. Only fire elements could be seen in the sky as Lin Yun used Flame Flash 3 times in a row before instantly reaching the tree's trunk. Lin Yun, as a regular human, truly looked like an ant as he stood in front of the colossal giant blood tree. Just as he stepped on the giant blood tree, 10 branches darted towards his back. Lin Yun didn't dare to stop, and shrouded in raging flames, he took a huge leap. He looked like a meteor hurtling down towards the giant blood tree's roots. When he saw that he was less than 50 meters from the ground, Lin Yun spread his wings and relied on the Lava Dominator's spatial power to rapidly stabilize his fall. He then poured a wisp of mana into the Soul Walker. "Why are you summoning Lord Sha?" A lazy voice suddenly came out, but this lazy voice immediately turned into a screech. "Fuck." Giant blood tree. Yes, as you can see, a giant blood tree. You. How did you provoke a giant blood tree? Lord Sean's voice was shaky. He couldn't control himself as he scolded, "Damn, that's a level 25 undead, equivalent to one of your 5th rank high mage humans. How could you provoke such a monster?" "It's level 26." Lin Yun controlled the flame wings to dodge the branch's attacks while correcting Lord Sean's mistake. "Maybe level 27. Go to hell." "Lord Sean, did you forget the master slave contract you signed with me? If I die, won't you drop to the level of a spiritual magic tool?" "Fuck. Had I known that you were so troublesome, I would have rather killed myself than sign a master-slave contract with you." "Okay, stop talking nonsense. I need your help." "What help?" Lord Sean was on guard. "You absorbed my level 18 mana crystals. Shouldn't you have recovered some power?" "I need you to make a soul cage to temporarily trap the giant blood tree's soul." "Don't play with me." Lin Yun didn't even finish explaining his plan before Lord Sean cried out in fear. "Impossible. Even with the mana I recovered from those mana crystals, how could I make such a powerful soul cage?" "That's why you need to use your magic tool incarnation. You are always hiding in the Soul Walker. Don't you feel that you are looking like a tortoise, using my magic tool incarnation? You are crazy." Lord Sean's voice was trembling from fear. He sounded as if he was on the verge of being fucked. At this time, he didn't even bicker with Lin Yun for being likened to a tortoise. The might of a true spirit magic tool lay in its magic tool incarnation. If Lord Sean really wanted to use his magic tool incarnation, he would be able to make a soul cage powerful enough to temporarily trap a giant blood tree's soul. But at the same time, utilizing the magic tool incarnation was very dangerous. If the magic tool incarnation suffered damage, it would lead to the true spirit magic tool deranking. If the magic tool incarnation died, it could even cause a true spirit magic tool to be reduced to an ordinary item. Lord Sean was relatively weak at this moment, his power not even at 1% of what it had been at his peak. And he would be facing a level 26 or 27 giant blood tree. In this situation, Lord Sean was naturally unwilling to use his magic tool incarnation. Lin Yun naturally knew that, and thus he didn't try to convince him that it would work when he saw his reaction. He only said, "Then you can start praying, hoping that the backlash of the master-slave contract won't make you fall to inheritance level." "Fuck." Lord Sean cursed. "Don't say inheritance." Lord Sean can't even bear being a spiritual magic tool. Although a spiritual magic tool would have a magic tool spirit, it would only be at the most basic level of spirituality. Comparing it to a magic tool incarnation was simply like comparing heaven and earth. To Lord Sean, falling to the spiritual level would be like dying. Even if he was extremely lucky and had a fortuitous encounter allowing him to rise to become a true spirit magic tool once again, the magic tool incarnation born then wouldn't be the current Lord Sean. "Fuck, you win." Sean finally cursed and the ghost wolf incarnation appeared. Chapter 145. River of 10,000 Ghosts. This chapter is updated by Novels.pl. After the sound of a deep roar, a translucent ghost wolf appeared on that dark red soil, with a pair of eyes flickering with mana and endless power flowing at the tip of its claws. For a moment, strange distortions appeared within the mana fluctuations surrounding it. This was the might of a true spirit magic tool incarnation. Unfortunately, the image was ruined because Lord Sean's voice was quivering way too much. "Merlin, are you sure?" "Okay, don't speak nonsense." It looked like the offensive of the giant blood tree was becoming even more fierce, and Lin Yun couldn't even stop to catch his breath, so how could he bother to assure him about certainty? "Quick, Soul Cage. Damn! Lord Sean ground his teeth as he cursed. He urged some of his mana out and a deep roar echoed as a strange hexagram star appeared on the dark red soil below him. Purple light crisscrossed on top of the hexagram. It looked incomparably dazzling in the dark red soil as an astonishing amount of mana began converging. In a flash, a cage of light appeared. This was the Soul Cage. All of a sudden, the giant blood tree shook. A scarlet shadow could be seen struggling in the Soul Cage. Without a doubt, that was the soul of the giant blood tree. Damn, hurry up. Just as the Soul Cage was formed, Lord Sean roared in alarm. He could already feel the giant blood tree struggling crazily, counter-attacking. If the Soul Cage was broken, the only fate awaiting him would be to become a mere spiritual magic tool. Only one of the two could survive now. Lord Sean truly went all out, reinforcing the Soul Cage as if his life depended on it, trapping the frantically struggling giant blood tree's soul. But he definitely wouldn't last long. Against such a powerful foe, with Lord Sean's current power, being able to keep the Soul Cage up for 30 seconds would be a miracle. Lin Yun knew about this, but it was his only opportunity. Although the Soul Cage wasn't actually a separate world, it could confine the giant blood tree's soul, and while the soul was imprisoned, it was the same as the giant blood tree being banished to another world. This was the only opportunity to separate the giant blood tree from the dark red soil. All he needed to do now was to thoroughly destroy the giant blood tree. Just as the Soul Cage appeared, Lin Yun used his casting ability to the utmost, firing off a total of 10 spells in just a moment, each of them carrying extreme might. But Lin Yun wasn't satisfied, because he discovered that the giant blood tree didn't show any signs of collapse, and on the contrary, it was actually struggling even more fiercely in the Soul Cage. All out. It had already reached the point where Lin Yun could only pull out all the stops. He poured mana into the Sage Chapter and a Frost Ring instantly burst out. This was the most powerful control spell in the second tier. After becoming an ultimate spell, it had an astonishing restrictive effect on enemies. A blue halo could be seen with Lin Yun at the center. In a flash, it spread and covered everything within several hundred meters. The entire area turned into an ice world. Even the frantically struggling giant blood tree was trapped in ice, and moving seemed exceptionally difficult. Naturally, those tentacle-like branches were more important. Hundreds of branches froze in an instant, turning into sculptures of ice, unable to continue their attack on Lin Yun. But at the same time, Lin Yun lost his last resort to protect himself. This was the Frost Ring. Lin Yun had originally planned to save it, to keep it in case he couldn't defeat the giant blood tree. With its power, he could buy himself time to escape. But Lin Yun ended up using his Frost Ring. Now that he had forced himself into this corner, his only choice was to triumph. And this was the perfect time, as its only means of attack, the branches, were frozen. Lin Yun's mana was ignited to the maximum. At this time, what defenses, what control, what flexibility? There was no use thinking about it. Right now, this was a contest over damage. He would either destroy the giant blood tree, or be destroyed. The magic arrays were frantically rotating as the mana within Lin Yun poured out like water from a broken dam as one spell after another blossomed with light within his hands. Countless spells filled the sky as they bombarded the giant blood tree. Fire, ice, lightning. A large, stifling elemental storm wreaked havoc on the giant blood tree. I'm at my limit. Lord Sean's voice came from below, but Lin Yun turned a deaf ear as he was completely immersed in casting his spells, throwing everything else to the back of his mind. There was only one thought in Lin Yun's mind: faster, faster, faster. Second after second passed, and after about 20 seconds, the Soul Cage's light was getting dimmer and dimmer, and it could be seen that the blood-red shadow would soon come out. Lin Yun only had one last chance. His mana poured into the Sage Chapter once again as the final ultimate spell glittered in the night sky. This was his last ultimate spell, Flame Storm. At the same time, it was the most powerful. When the mana was infused, the sparkling pure Sage Chapter looked as if it had burst into flames, flickering wildly in Lin Yun's hands. An explosion thundered as 9 flaming dragons rushed out from the Sage Chapter with deafening roars. Even the air was burning as the mana within the atmosphere completely flared up. The power displayed at this instant was already approaching that of a 6th-tier spell. A loud rumbling sound then echoed as the 9 flaming dragons ruthlessly charged onto the giant blood tree, making the red shadow within the soul cage issue a mournful scream. Then, silence filled the blood forest. The several 100-meter-tall giant blood tree withered at a visible speed, and the hundreds of branches hung down lifelessly, before turning into ashes. The leaves yellowed and fell off as the trunk withered. The giant blood tree that had once dominated the entire blood forest seemed to have aged millennia in an instant, crumbling away into ashes in front of Lin Yun. Fu Lin Yun sighed in relief and slowly hovered down from the sky. While looking for the precious blood heart within the ashes, he asked Lord Sean in a concerned tone, "How is it, you still alive?" "I won't die before you." The dejected ghost wolf shot out of the ashes before shaking the residue away while cursing resentfully. "Right, at worst, you'd become a spiritual magic tool," Lin Yun snickered before quickly finding the blood heart. The blood heart looked like a pure ruby the size of a fist. It let out shining red lights under the night sky. Moreover, it was still throbbing within his hands. Lin Yun could feel a surge in vitality with each of the throbs. Compared to this blood heart, those previous life crystals were truly too inferior, on a completely different level. It could be said that the life energy contained within all the life crystals of the undead Eldertrians still simply couldn't compare to the blood heart's life energy. Indeed, this was the blood heart, the origin of life of all undead Eldertrians. The blood forest headed towards its death after losing the blood heart. Weeds wilted, leaves withered, and one after another, undead Eldertrians turned to ashes drifting in the wind just like their ancestor. After a few minutes, the dense and lush blood forest disappeared, giving way to a desolate plain. Now, the river of 10,000 ghosts. There should still be time left. Lin Yun casually threw the blood heart into his pocket while treading upon the ashes of the forest that he'd destroyed. The blood forest wasn't far from the river of 10,000 ghosts, and it only took 20 minutes for Lin Yun to reach a precipitous cliff. Atop the cliff was a sinister forest suffused with cold winds, and below was a black river surging onward. Countless ghosts were struggling as they were drowning in the river. Mournful howls and weeping cries echoed in Lin Yun's ears. Under the stifling death energy, countless illusions appeared before Lin Yun's eyes. That test in the Prince Tomb simply couldn't compare. Lin Yun's spirit defense lost its effect for the first time. With his peak spirit defense, he still couldn't break away from the ghosts. Nothing could be done about it, as the river of 10,000 ghosts truly had too many of them, to the point that they simply couldn't be counted. One or two might be fine, but withstanding several thousand or even several 100,000 ghosts appearing at the same time, let alone a great mage like Lin Yun, even a high mage wouldn't be able to resist these illusions. It could be said that this was a true path of no return. Unless one was an archmage, one simply couldn't make it through this river of 10,000 ghosts. But Lin Yun stood on the cliff, and without a shred of hesitation, cast a float and a water walk. Once he was done, Lin Yun directly leapt down towards that black river filled with drowning ghosts. Chapter 146, Ghost King. This chapter is updated by Novels.pl. Lin Yun was still in the air when ghosts pounced over at him. The river of 10,000 ghosts was named this way due to the amount of ghosts within, far surpassing any place within Nocent. It could be said that the entire Bone Plains ghosts were already focused in the river of 10,000 ghosts. It could be seen from how several hundred ghosts were surging towards Lin Yun while he was still several hundred meters above the river. Ghosts were unconventional undead life forms, monsters made up of negative emotions and shattered souls. They didn't have real bodies. They didn't have formidable power, and they didn't even have thoughts. They would end up drifting in the same area forever, continuously exuding an aura of death and resentment. Unless it was a special area, places where ghosts were concentrated would definitely become sinister and full of death, just like the Flame Tyrant's Ghost City. The fighting strength of ghosts was actually not worth talking about. For the most part, they were around level 5, and furthermore, they didn't have the ability to think. They only had one fighting strategy, which was to tear at their targets like wild beasts. But now, Several hundred of them were pouncing towards Lin Yan. This was certainly an amount that was enough to make a 5th rank great mage nervous. However, Lin Yan wasn't paying much attention to them. He urged his magic arrays and was computing at a shocking speed, analyzing the aura of these ghosts. Lin Yan wanted a brand new version of spirit defense. There really were too many ghosts in the river of 10,000 ghosts, to the point that his spirit defense couldn't handle them, allowing these several hundreds to cause him to experience illusions. Wouldn't he go crazy when several thousands charged at him? To Lin Yan, a satisfactory spirit defense was most important. As for those several hundred ghosts, before they were able to draw close to Lin Yan, they felt the pressure of undead predator. This was the pressure that the masses would feel when a ruler looked at them. Even if they were formed from negative emotions and fragments of souls, they had an instinctive fear of that pressure. However, although those ghosts could feel fear deep within them, they weren't like those skeleton warriors who would all bolt in defeat. They stopped charging at him, but they didn't flee, either. They only kept a certain distance from Lin Yan, trailing behind him like sinister puppies. His magic arrays finished the complex calculations when he reached the river of 10,000 ghosts. A brand new spirit defense finally covered Lin Yan. Lin Yan suddenly felt his surroundings quieten down, and there were no more strange hallucinations appearing around him. Naturally, it would be impossible to completely avoid the harassment of the ghosts in a place such as the river of 10,000 ghosts. After the spirit defense had been reinforced by the magic arrays, it still could only block most of the illusions. For the rest, he could only rely on his staunch willpower. Lin Yan's feet were already reaching the water surface. Under the support of the 4th tier spell, Water Walk, the water felt just like solid ground. From Lin Yan's current position, he could clearly see the countless ghosts drowning in the river. Mournful howls and weeping kept echoing in his ears, sounding sinister and strange, making his heart tighten. An endless amount of ghosts covered the horizon. Although the river of 10,000 ghosts flowed for about 3 kilometers, the ghosts gathered that amounted to several millions. It was also for this reason that even though the Ivory Tower were able to conquer the Bone Plain several millennia later, the members who had yet to reach the Archmage realm weren't allowed to approach this river. It was a true forbidden region. Aside from a person on par with Archmages, only an abnormal existence like Lin Yan could enter this place. And the main reason that he could get here this early was the undead predator ability. For great mages, and even for high mages, the assault of several 100,000 ghosts was inescapable. Even if they were around level 5, even if they fought like wild beasts, once the scale reached hundreds of thousands, those weak points would become meaningless. But to Lin Yan with his undead predator ability, ghosts didn't have the same meaning. As long as he was able to deal with the illusions and hallucinations, the river of 10,000 ghosts would be the shortcut leading him directly to the Book of Death. Lin Yan stepped on the surging waves as he followed the river, while countless ghosts followed him. Yet none of the ghosts dared to breach the 10-meter void around him. They only screamed, wept, and wailed with all their strength. But in the end, they were unable to stop Lin Yan's progress across the river of 10,000 ghosts. He soon crossed over half of the 3-kilometer-long river, with none of the ghosts managing to get any closer to him during that time. Lin Yan's expression grew grave as drew closer to the Book of Death. He tightly held his spiritual magic staff in one hand while clenching the blood heart in his pocket with the other hand. He knew that he only had one chance. Under the impetuous waves, several hundred meters were crossed in an instant. From his position, he could already see a huge figure standing at the end of the river. That was the Ghost King. It was the ruler of the countless ghosts within the river, and its strength far surpassed that of the giant blood tree he had battled earlier. It was only a step away from reaching level 30. In the entire Bone Plain, the only existence stronger than this Ghost King was the Bone Dragon slumbering at the Bone Peak. Besides that slumbering Bone Dragon, the only thing that could restrain the Ghost King was the blood heart in Lin Yan's hands. It's time. Lin Yan's grip tightened on the blood heart. One opportunity would decide between life and death. 300 meters, 200 meters, 100 meters. The distance between them was slowly. Lin Yan, who was softly walking on the surging waves, felt cold sweat on his palms. 50 meters, 30 meters, 20 meters. Lin Yan could already see the Ghost King's sinister face, a pair of window-sized eyes staring at him. Sharp teeth were visible in the bloody maw. "I dare you to bite me." The elemental incarnation prepared in Lin Yun's spiritual magic staff was released, and he instantly transformed into a flowing stream of water. In his water elemental incarnation state, Lin Yun used the waves of the river to transform into a sharp arrow shooting towards the open maw of the Ghost King. Just as he went in, Lin Yun poured mana into the blood heart, and with the help of a prepared alchemy array, a huge amount of life energy gushed out. That was the entire Blood Forest's life energy. Even if the Ghost King was already a frightening existence approaching level 30, it could only let out a blood-curdling screech under the attack of such powerful life energy. Life energy was a source of power that all animals and plants yearned for. But for the Ghost King, it was like a fierce poison piercing it from the inside. That's right, piercing from inside. The blood heart surging with life energy almost instantly gouged through the Ghost King's chest, and Lin Yun, who had just been swallowed by it, used this wound to flow out. An angry roar echoed behind him. But Lin Yun didn't throw a single glance back and directly leapt down the end of the river of 10,000 ghosts. It was a bottomless cliff. The river of 10,000 ghosts was flowing down this cliff as countless ghosts were screaming amidst the misty water. While still being surrounded by these ghosts, he poured mana into the lava dominator, and the pair of flaming wings spread out again, fiercely flapping, leading him towards the place he remembered from the notes. The Ghost King's roar sounded more and more distant, and the illusions before his eyes gradually faded away. As he flew away, Lin Yun eventually was certain that he had left the range of the river of 10,000 ghosts. After Lin Yun touched down to the ground, he raised his head and looked around. His surroundings were filled with bones. There was a majestic palace several hundred meters ahead. However, that palace hadn't been built from brick, but rather from ghastly and sinister bones. That was Lin Yun's destination, the Bone Peak. The summit of the Bone Plain, the location where the Book of Death resided, and also the place where the Bone Dragon was slumbering. Several millennia later, the three young mages from the Ivory Tower would drive a worn-out magic battleship, and the first volley of cannon fire landed exactly on this Bone Peak, conveniently ending the life of the slumbering Bone Dragon. Unfortunately, Lin Yun didn't have a magic battleship right now. Thus, Lin Yun had no choice but to be cautious, approaching the Bone Peak very slowly. But at least he had gone through a shortcut by ending the Blood Forest and forcing his way through the river of 10,000 ghosts before finally standing in front of the Bone Peak. The Bone Dragon's lair was a place that ordinary undead creatures didn't dare to approach. After avoiding a few groups of Bone Knights, he smoothly entered the Bone Peak. Then, Lin Yun used haste on himself. Lin Yun knew that the Bone Dragon was slumbering, so he had to be careful. It wouldn't be that easy to grab the Book of Death once the Bone Dragon awakened. After being melded in the magic array, this haste spell made Lin Yun's speed reach its limits. He managed to pass through the entire Bone Peak in less than 10 minutes and stood in the middle of a spacious hall made of bones. This hall was a few hundred meters wide, feeling spacious and cold. Besides a hexagram star array flickering with a dazzling light, there was only a black book hovering above the ground. Lin Yun knew that this was the Book of Death. Chapter 147, Spatial Overlap. This chapter is updated by novels.pl. The Book of Death was there. It looked as if Lin Yun could take this extraordinary magic tool just by walking up and reaching out with his hand. That was a power surpassing all ordinary living beings. If Lin Yun could control just 1% of its power, it would be enough for him to sweep aside all high mages and contend against an archmage. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that this was the kind of power that could let Lin Yun reach the peak in a single step. Having an extraordinary magic tool in this era was equivalent to having the power to stand against a force like the Black Tower. Lin Yun had entered the Bone Plain 4 times in half a year, experiencing danger after danger as he struggled his way through, before finally reaching this Book of Death. But now, as Lin Yun stood in front of his goal, not a hint of happiness was visible within his eyes. They were filled with vigilance instead, because he already felt that the mana fluctuations in his hall were very strange. The mysterious Book of Death was visible within the strange hexagram star formation in the sinister Bone Hall, but the mana fluctuations seemed to be abnormally fierce here, as if they were igniting. Moreover, it carried a dense smell of sulfur, and just by standing there, he felt a bit of dizziness along with some chest pain. Is it an illusion? Thinking of that possibility, Lin Yun subconsciously cast Spirit Defense. Strange, but nothing changed in the hall after the spell was cast, making doubt appear on his face. After all, after coming to this era, Lin Yun had encountered illusions many times. Even the Death Garden's illusion could be said to have already touched on the frightening existence of the laws. After casting that Spirit Defense, Lin Yun looked for some clues, but the spell was completely ineffective. Is it truly not an illusion? But the flowing mana can't lie. To a mage, their sense of the flow of mana was far more reliable than their eyes. What their eyes could see might not necessarily be real, but the truth could always be found by observing the mana. Due to his hesitation, Lin Yun still didn't dare to step into the hall. Instead, he patiently roused his magic arrays to make a thorough analysis of the hall's flow of mana. At this time, Lin Yun could only be grateful that he chose the most troublesome magic array when building his magic conducting rune. True, the difficulty of forming magic arrays was somewhat excessive. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that if Lin Yun had decided on a more typical magic conducting rune, such as the Extreme Forge, which strengthened the might of spells, Time Hand, which improved casting speed, or Endless Spring, which supplied copious amounts of mana, he would have already reached the 9th rank. Moreover, the power of the magic conducting rune might not necessarily be much inferior to that the magic array. As for the magic array itself, even after Lin Yun found the reincarnation eyes in the Prince Tomb and accumulated over 100,000 runes in a month, he only became a 5th rank Great Mage. It could be seen from this how much trouble it was building the magic array. But, forming such a troublesome magic array wasn't just for power. The magic array's frightening computational ability was what Lin Yun truly needed. Just like right now, Lin Yun only needed to gather some of the mana within the hall, and his magic arrays carefully and precisely analyzed it. After a long minute, Lin Yun slowly stood up. When he opened his eyes, Lin Yun's gaze didn't have the doubt he previously had. Turns out it is a spatial overlay apostrophe. Although Lin Yun still couldn't see anything with his eyes, after the analysis of his magic array, the mana flowing within the hall was already pictured in his mind, and through that flow of mana, Lin Yun could clearly understand the secret of the hall. Indeed, that seemingly unobstructed hall actually was two spaces overlaid upon each other. Fortunately, Lin Yun had been alert. If he had been overzealous, he would have ended up in huge trouble. Lin Yun couldn't take a single wrong step within the overlaid space. If he did, he would fall into the other space, and from the thick smell of sulfur, that space was most likely the demon plane. What would await him? There might be demons, greater demons, or even demon overlords. Walking in the rifts between the two spaces wasn't a good idea either. Doing that would result in being cut into countless fragments. In other words, even though the hall seemed empty, it could be said that Lin Yun's didn't have a lot of space to walk in, and these spaces weren't something he could casually pass. The boundary between the two spaces had already become extremely frail, and it could be said that only if Lin Yun asked an Archmage powerhouse would he be able to open a planar path here through magic burst. Naturally, Lin Yun wouldn't do this, at least not now. Lin Yun felt his head ache. How could he still have time to think about opening a planar path? If he could, Lin Yun would separate the two spaces. That way, he wouldn't have to face the countless demons. I can only do that. Lin Yun took a deep breath while tightly holding the spiritual magic staff in his hand. He then stepped into the hall. The magic arrays were roused. A flow of mana clearly appeared in Lin Yun's mind, and the entire hall turned into a different world. This was an abstract world, and there was no hexagram star array in that world, nor was there any black book. Only the flow of mana was there, as well as the overlapping spaces. From the entrance of the hall to the center, there was a total distance of over 20 meters, but Lin Yun knew that these dozens of meters were more troublesome than the few kilometers of the River of 10,000 Ghosts. Sure enough, just as he stepped foot in the hall, the hexagram star array flashed with a dark ray of light before a thick smell of sulfur assaulted his nose. Lin Yun only heard a screech behind him before the temperature abruptly rose around him. He turned around and caught sight of 3 fireballs flying at him. He reacted quickly, releasing an ice fire shield immediately. The two red and blue lights circled around him rapidly as the three fireballs exploded on them, and not one managed to get through. Lin Yun managed to see who had attacked him amidst the flames. Three short and sinister monsters. Their skin seemed to be scorched and covered with flame-like magic patterns, and each had a pair of curved horns sprouting from its forehead. Lin Yun knew that they were ash imps, fire spirits born from lava. They innately had the power to control flames, and although their level of power was comparable to that of mages, they usually moved in groups of over several hundreds to 1,000. In a real battle, even many powerful demons would retreat. Fortunately, only 3 of them appeared here. Lin Yun pointed the spiritual magic staff at them and cast a frost ring, freezing the 3 ash imps in an instant under the scattering ice. He didn't waste any time and cast 3 tornado whips to shatter the ash imps into pieces. Annoying Lin Yun's expression didn't ease up after he dealt with the 3 ash imps. It was because he knew that this was only the beginning. The 2 spaces were already overlapping and the boundaries between both had already become extremely frail. It would usually be fine, but stepping into the hall would draw some demons to the bone plane. This also meant that he would experience a battle at every step. The only bright side was that these ash imps weren't too powerful. After all, the 2 spaces weren't completely overlapped. The power that the area could hold was very limited. If a demon that was too powerful wanted to enter the bone plane, it would immediately suffer from rejection from both planes simultaneously. But even so, it was already troublesome enough. With the distance between the entrance of the hall and the Book of Death, he would have to fight over 20 battles before reaching the book. Moreover, he also had to keep in mind that he should never use spells that were too powerful during these battles. It was because the more powerful a spell was, the more easily it would destroy the unstable space. If he wasn't careful and accidentally created some sort of planar path, he wouldn't be able to forgive himself. After scattering the 3 ash imps, Lin Yun shook his head and once again stepped towards the Book of Death. After his first experience, Lin Yun was already on guard. Sure enough, just as he stepped again, Lin Yun felt the mana flow in his surroundings becoming strange. The boundary between the spaces turned indistinct and a sulphurous smell came from the demon plane, assaulting him instantly. Chapter 148, Maluo. This chapter is updated by Novels.pl. This time, a 10-meter-tall Void Walker appeared. A strange distortion appeared in the hall, as a dozen ash imps appeared behind it. The smell of the sulfur from the abyssal fire spread to his nostrils. Damn, Lin Yun instantly cursed. The Void Walker was troublesome enough as it had power comparable to a level 30 magic beast, and it also had the ability to devour mana. Even a high mage would be troubled, and it was even followed by a dozen ash imps, 1 in front and a dozen behind, and it wasn't as simple as taking the sum of their strength. Unfortunately, Lin Yun didn't have the luxury to choose. With the deep roar of the Void Walker, the ash imps raised their flaming claws and one fireball after another heavily flew towards Lin Yun. He promptly roused his ice fire shield, resisting the dozen of fireballs while at the same time blocking the Void Walker's attack. The Void Walker's power was tyrannical, but to a mage, the most troublesome thing about it was actually its mana-devouring ability. Void Walkers were often called mage killers because of that detestable ability. Even for high mages and archmages, if their mana was eaten away, the only fate that awaited them was to be trampled to death. Lin Yun naturally didn't dare to be careless. After the ice fire shield resisted the first volley of fireballs, Lin Yun didn't counterattack, and instead activated the Lava Dominator. But rather than using the flame wings this time, he activated its absolute defense, the Lava Shelter. Only a blaze could be seen as the Lava Shelter expanded and the Void Walker that had been rushing at Lin Yun suddenly knocked against it. The whole hall shook when the level 30 monster clashed against the Lava Shelter. Such a frightening power, Lin Yun couldn't help feeling a twinge of fear. Fortunately, the Lava Dominator was in his hands, or else he might not have been able to endure its strike. After all, he was in between 2 planes, so he didn't dare to use 3rd and 4th tier spells. He didn't dare to hope that he would be able to block the Void Walker by relying on just the Ice Fire Shield, Flame Barrier, Ice Armor, and other such spells. Strictly speaking, the Lava Shelter's defensive ability was equivalent to a 5th tier spell, but because the mana was being processed by the magic tool, it was already formed by the time it was released, and thus, it was stable enough to not have any influence on the spatial boundaries. After the lava shelter was released, the rest of the fight became a lot less complicated. Lin Yun stood behind its protection and cast several dozen low-tier spells on the Void Walker, so many that they fell like rain. Finally, that famous mage killer was cut into pieces by Lin Yun's wind blades. After dealing with the Void Walker, the dozen ash imps weren't as troublesome. Lin Yun followed the same strategy, using Frost Ring and Tornado Whip, and the dozen ash imps shattered into pieces. But for Lin Yun, this was still only the beginning. This short distance felt far more hopeless than its appearance would suggest. Lin Yun was forced into a fight after each step, and the enemies were all lesser demons from the abyss. There were ash imps, void walkers, hellhounds, horn demons, and others. It could be said that Lin Yun's walk through this hall was like reading a lesser demon encyclopedia that had its contents come to life. Moreover, the quantity kept increasing, as did their strength. During the last battle, Lin Yun even alerted a great demon with a true name. Fortunately, that greater demon's power was too great, and thus it hadn't been able to come with its main body, so it only sent one claw over. But just that one claw was enough to make Lin Yun suffer. This fight was simply miserable. After no less than an hour, Lin Yun finally forced that claw to return to the demon plane. But just as the claw disappeared, a deafening roar echoed. "Worm, you dare to injure Lord Meluo? One day, Lord Meluo will descend into your world and make you suffer eternal torment from ice and frost." Meluo. When he heard that name, Lin Yun truly became frightened. In the legends, Frost Lord Thun was served by 6 great demons, one of which was Meluo. Meluo actually wasn't too worrying. Although a greater demon was powerful, Lin Yun believed that once he entered the High Mage realm, he would be able to contend against one. But Frost Lord Thun, that was a frightening existence on the same level as Desolate Lord Julux. Not to mention becoming a High Mage, even if he became an Archmage, in front of the Frost Lord, he might not be stronger than an ant. Damn, how can I be so unlucky as to have that person as my neighbor? Lin Yun cursed to himself, before his sight fell on the Book of Death. The Book of Death was finally in front of him, and just by reaching out, he would be able to have an extraordinary magic tool in his hands. Lin Yun took a deep breath before extending a shivering right hand. But just as Lin Yun's fingers touched the Book of Death, a deafening roar echoed above him. Fuck, the Bone Dragon. Lin Yun jumped out, startled. How could this happen? Before Lin Yun could draw out a plan, the book at his fingertips burst with shocking power. The space around Lin Yun twisted, and the sinister hall, the strange hexagram star array, and the mysterious book all disappeared. It looked as if Lin Yun had fallen into a black wasteland. After carefully looking around, he felt that it looked like the black wasteland the Bone Devil had been slumbering in. Hold on, this is wrong, Lin Yun observed. That black wasteland didn't have such frightening death energy. Not to mention the Bone Devil slumbering in the black wasteland, even the Bone Dragon slumbering at the summit didn't hold such frightening death energy. Upon appearing here, Lin Yun's first thought had been that he had entered a death garden. The death energy was too frightening and showed some hint of laws. Human, you truly overestimated yourself. While Lin Yun was feeling puzzled, a black silhouette started approaching from the other end of the black wasteland. It looked as if that figure could cross the entire black wasteland with a mere step, and just as the voice echoed, the figure already stood in front of Lin Yun. Such insignificant power, yet vainly attempting to become my master? You are? Lin Yun was frozen at first, before he opened his eyes wide. You are the Book of Death? No, no, the black figure shook his head. Because of the cloak covering his face, it was too hard to make out his expression. You can call me Cain. As for the Book of Death, if you truly get the chance to become my master, you would understand then that I'm not just the Book of Death. What do you mean, not just the Book of Death? Human, you have too many questions. What does something so important have to do with you? Do you think that with your pitiful power, you'll be able to become my master? A mocking tone was hidden with the black silhouette's laughter as he continued, but you are the first human to come in touch with me after 1,000 years. I have to give you a fair chance. Fair chance? Lin Yun held his breath. Although he hadn't confirmed the other side's level of strength, just the ability to cross the plane in one step was inherent to archmages. Moreover, it would be like the power of a peak archmage. Such an existence offered a fair fight. This was like an elephant inviting an ant to arm wrestle and saying, "Don't be scared, I'll only use one hand. If you can defeat me, I will think about serving you. What if I lose?" If you lose, the black silhouette stood up straight. If you lose, you'll forever remain trapped in this deathly wasteland. After hearing this, the figure didn't wait for Lin Yun to respond and directly cast Elemental Incarnation, charging at Lin Yun with raging flames trailing behind him. "Damn, this is cheating." Lin Yun instantly cursed. What was that about a fair fight? Elemental Incarnation was a third-tier spell. Even if he now possessed 5 magic arrays, he still needed 3 seconds to cast his own. Yet, that Cain instant casted Elemental Incarnation after saying it would be a fair fight. How was this fair? Lin Yun inwardly grumbled while hurrying to react. A being that could instant cast Elemental Incarnation had to have an understanding of that spell that had reached a shocking level. If Lin Yun allowed him to approach, he didn't have confidence that he would be able to block the attack. Lin Yun immediately retreated a dozen steps. But the speed of Elemental Incarnation was greater. Though Lin Yun quickly drew back, the distance between them didn't grow, and instead, it was reduced by a meter in a wink. At that time, the silhouette would be able to easily break Lin Yun's neck just by lifting his hand. Chapter 149. Fall into my lap. This chapter is updated by novels.pl. This was definitely in existence with the strength of an archmage. Lin Yun didn't dare to hold back and directly cast an ice wall. But Cain was too fast. Raging flames appeared in front of Lin Yun before his ice wall even formed. An explosion echoed out as the ice wall burst open. Rushing through the ice shards, Cain's Elemental Incarnation wasn't slowed at all, and the flames enveloped Lin Yun. In the mist formed from the melting of the ice shards, Lin Yun only had time to cast ice armor before another deep explosion rang. In that split second, Lin Yun felt as if he had been hit by a meteor as he was sent flying. After hurtling several dozens of meters away, Lin Yun crashed onto the ground. He felt as if every bone in his body had shattered, as if his internal organs were on fire. He wanted to get up, but moving made him feel a sharp pain in his chest, and immediately afterwards, he spat up some blood. As Lin Yun wiped off the blood at the corner of his mouth, his pale face was somewhat frightening, but strangely, he was actually smiling despite being in this state. Turns out it's like this apostrophe. Lin Yun understood. Why would Cain say that he would give him a fair fight? After all, the fighting power that Cain displayed was definitely that of a peak archmage. That Elemental Incarnation wasn't something that could be withstood by a 5th-rank Great Mage's ice armor. But Lin Yun withstood it. No, this wasn't Cain being lenient. Rather, just as Cain said, he had a chance at a fair fight. In fact, the instant he cast that ice armor, Lin Yun had felt that the power that he had released was far stronger than that of a 5th-rank Great Mage. It was 100 times to 1,000 times stronger. But everything had happened too quickly, so Lin Yun hadn't been able to react before being sent flying by the raging flames. After regaining his bearings, Lin Yun finally realized what had happened. Indeed, this was the fair fight Cain had talked about. In this world created by the Book of Death, he already possessed the power of an archmage. Human, you are truly overestimating your abilities. In his Elemental Incarnation state, Cain was made up of raging flames, and within his mocking tone was an indistinct trace of disappointment. Ha ha, don't you think that this is too early to draw such a conclusion? Lin Yun stood up from the ground and looked at Cain while exuding endless self-confidence. Good, then show me your skills. Just as Cain said those words, the raging flames were roused. He only took one step, yet the flame path was already burning under Lin Yun's feet, while the surroundings within a kilometer had already turned into a sea of fire. Moreover, Cain was still chanting his incantation, and Lin Yun felt as if a mountain had been smashed as the earth shook and the black wasteland suddenly split open. In a flash, a thick pitch-black smoke could be seen covering the sky as lava started flowing above the ground. Cain had actually summoned an active volcano. Day of Destruction. Lin Yun was startled. This Cain was truly troublesome. He actually used a legendary 8th tier spell. At this time, he couldn't care about keeping elemental incarnation as a last resort. He quickly incanted and turned into a mass of raging flames, wanting to borrow the sea of flames under him to escape with Flame Flash. But before he could cast Flame Flash, Lin Yun suddenly noticed something strange. As an 8th tier spell, Day of Destruction already approached the Extraordinary Realm's strength. It was not an exaggeration to describe it as calamitous. Any regular mage would choose to escape when faced with such power. The obvious first choice for escaping would be to use Flame Flash while in the elemental incarnation state, and the Sea of Fire brought about by Cain's flame path should be the only way out. This was inevitable. The question was, what was behind this inevitable attack? Cain was the incarnation of the Book of Death, so how could he make such an obvious mistake, leaving his opponent an obvious escape route? He first used Flame Path to make an endless Sea of Fire and then followed up with Day of Destruction, this 8th tier spell that would normally leave no way out. Wasn't it simply telling him, "Come here, fall into my lap"? Damn, too sly apostrophe. After Lin Yun angrily cursed him in his mind, he forcibly scattered the Flame Flash elements and chose not to retreat, but to actually go forward, using the speed produced by elemental incarnation to start climbing to the top of the erupting volcano. Cain was puzzled by Lin Yun's unexpected action, but then, he increased the output of Day of Destruction. Flaming rocks and lava surged, turning the black wasteland into a cataclysmic scene. Meanwhile, Lin Yun used a shocking speed to climb to the top. An archmage's elemental incarnation was completely different from a great mage's. Lin Yun's form was now just like that of a flame spirit, completely looking like burning lightning. His entire world seemed to sway as thick smoke formed a cloud in the sky, with raging flames almost igniting the entire sky as huge, flaming rocks rolled about everywhere. Lin Yun was almost crushed a few times. As the lava was flowing down, Lin Yun seemed to be walking on a tightrope. If he wasn't cautious, he would fall into a deep abyss of defeat. But Lin Yun didn't plan to retreat. He was like a flame spirit, finding a gap between the flowing magma and flaming rocks, using his extreme speed to reach the top, because this was his only opportunity. Cain's Day of Destruction had sealed his escape. Flame Flash, spatial folding, flight, tunnel. All methods below the Extraordinary Realm had already been taken into account by Cain. It could be said that Cain had an answer to all of those. As long as Lin Yun made a move to escape, he would immediately fall into Cain's trap. This was the frightening part about the Book of Death. Lin Yun remembered what Bane wrote in his diary in his later years. His greatest regret was that he had never been able to break the true secret of the Book of Death. He had always felt that the Book of Death's complete form was very likely to be one of the first two books born with the world. The Book of Laws recording all spells in the world. Naturally, this Book of Death was far from its complete form. Not to mention its complete form, the current Book of Death was far from the one Bane spent millennia on, or else Cain wouldn't have just shown abilities at the peak of the Archmage realm, but rather, the power of the Extraordinary Realm. But Bane's guess made a lot of sense. It could be seen from the current Cain, although he was only the incarnation of the Book of Death. What he displayed in this battle really was a frightening scheme. He used elemental incarnation, flame path, and Day of Destruction to make an almost inescapable trap. This wasn't something an ordinary mage could do. Even Lin Yun, who came from the end of the magic era, didn't have such ability. True, Lin Yun had incomparably advanced magic knowledge, and he truly did possess casting abilities far surpassing any ordinary mage, but in the end, Lin Yun was only a human. He wasn't an ice-cold machine. As long as one was human, they would make mistakes. They would overlook things. They would never be like this Cain, computing every detail, every possibility, and then building a near-perfect trap. But, being good at planning wasn't the most important thing, as long as one was good enough at destroying. Lin Yun was like that. After avoiding the fiery rocks, stepping on the gaps within the lava, and moving across like flaming lightning, he finally reached the top of the active volcano. This was the place where the power of the Day of Destruction spell was the densest. All fire elements were gathered in this area that was less than 10 meters wide. Any random eruption had the strength of a 6th tier spell at the very least. The frighteningly high temperature was enough to melt steel in a second. The pitch-black poisonous fog present everywhere was something even a dragon couldn't resist. Lin Yun could stand here only because of his elemental incarnation form. The elemental incarnation of a peak archmage already was a pure elemental spirit. Although it couldn't withstand the might of Day of Destruction directly, it still had some immunity to the poisonous fog and the high temperature. But naturally, it wouldn't last long. Maybe 10 seconds, maybe a handful. If Lin Yun couldn't deal with it now, then there would be no need for Cain to make a move, as harsh environment of the volcano would be enough to make Lin Yun fall and remain in this black wasteland forever. Chapter 150, Final Spell. This chapter is updated by Novels.pl. In the distance, Cain was still in his elemental incarnation state, but besides controlling the Day of Destruction spell, Cain didn't cast anything else. He was looking from the distance, watching Lin Yun standing at the erupting volcanic crater at the top of the volcano as he cast a long incantation. There was a hint of ridicule within Cain's gaze. That was the core of his spell, where the temperature was extremely high, and it was filled with poisonous fog. It could easily take an archmage's life at any time. Chanting an incantation in that place, wasn't it no different from killing oneself? And so what if Lin Yun managed to complete his spell? Day of Destruction was already active, so regardless of how that young human struggled, he was bound to become a corpse in the Black Wasteland. Unfortunately, Cain's countless years of waiting would end up in another disappointment. Cain shook his head as looked at the other side with cold eyes, calmly waiting for that long chant to end. The seconds ticked by. Lin Yun's incantation became increasingly louder, and the pitch-black cloud was faintly starting to turn red. At first glance, it looked just like the burning sunset as flaming red heat filled the atmosphere, suppressing even the erupting volcano. When the final rune was cast, the cloud instantly scattered as a huge meteor with a long flaming tail fell from the sky. If 10 other archmages watched this scene, all 10 of them would sigh while shaking their heads. This was simply making a mess. Day of Destruction was an 8th tier spell, an extremely powerful fire spell reaching the boundary of the extraordinary realm. If one wanted to use the similarly ranked 8th tier spell Heaven's Fall Meteor to contend with it, they could only be described as naive, ridiculous. Cain coldly snorted from the distance. He originally had some expectations for what the young man had in mind, but after the appearance of the meteor, he lost all his patience. A huge amount of mana instantly burst out as Day of Destruction's power increased once again. The entire volcano seemed to be roused as it seemed to be on the verge of erupting. The burst power contained within the volcano seemed like it would be to destroy heaven and earth. And even a heaven-rank powerhouse would have no choice but to dodge that burst of power, let alone Lin Yun, who was still at the top of the volcano. The frantic flow of lava, the raging volcano, the falling meteor. This looked like a true apocalypse. Then, yet another explosion thundered out. The falling meteor crashed into the volcano and exploded, creating spurts of lava reaching several dozen meters into the sky. But at that time, Lin Yun had already completed his flight incantation and was rushing to take to the sky. The poisonous miasma in the sky had already been pierced by the meteor, just enough to make a gap for Lin Yun. After flying up, Lin Yun used 2 spells to disguise his location and hide within the splashing lava. Truly naive Cain watched the young mage's actions with cold eyes as he calmly waited for his spell to do its work and release truly destructive power. A dozen meters, several dozen meters, it wouldn't make any difference. But after Cain waited for a long time, the eruption still didn't happen. No, it wasn't that it didn't happen. In fact, it showed signs of cooling down, and even the flowing lava seemed to have lost its source. What's going on? Cain seemed to be shocked for the first time. Ha ha, didn't I tell you that some words shouldn't be said too early at this time? Lin Yun had already left the range of the volcano summoned by Day of Destruction and fired his own spell at Cain. This was crucial for Lin Yun. Cain's plan had been based on his Day of Destruction spell. Now that Lin Yun had broken away from it, He had a lot of space to maneuver and didn't have his hands and feet tied like before. How could Lin Yun miss such an opportunity? The instant he left the volcano, he attacked the stunned Kain. This was the first time Lin Yun held the initiative in this fight, and it might be the only time. Having gone through the first exchange, Lin Yun knew how hard it was to get this initiative. Kain's strength was at an unreasonable level, and it wasn't only his might, but also his battle awareness. From the start, Kain had not only displayed overpowering strength, but he also made Lin Yun feel as if he had been stuck in a huge spider web. No matter how much he struggled, that huge spider web remained taut, slowly tightening, making Lin Yun despair little by little, up until Lin Yun stood on top of the volcanic crater and let off that Heaven's Fall that left Kain stunned. Only Lin Yun knew how crucial that Heaven's Fall meteor was. It could be said that this 8th tier spell was the most perfect spell he had cast ever since he arrived in this era, displaying the best of Lin Yun's casting ability. Whether it was the meteor's accuracy, or the size of the meteor itself, there was not a single mistake with the spell, and it perfectly blocked the volcano's crater. That's right. The volcanic crater had been blocked by Lin Yun. This was perhaps the most inexplicable use of this 8th tier spell ever since it was first conceived. Even the incarnation of the Book of Death wouldn't have thought that such a baffling scene would occur. The power of Day of Destruction came from the violent eruption, from lava to flames, from the poisonous miasma to the scorching temperature. The last burst also had to come from the volcanic crater. And in the end, the crater had been blocked by the meteor. Thus, all the burst power had been suppressed and unable to unleash its destruction on the surroundings. Of course, as an 8th tier spell infinitely close to the extraordinary realm, the spell still wouldn't be completely stopped by a meteor. Lin Yun only flew away for about 5 seconds before that meteor exploded from the might of the spell. But it was meaningless by then, since 5 seconds were enough for Lin Yun to break away from Day of Destruction's range and use the opportunity to launch an attack on Kain. Lin Yun knew that this was likely to be his only opportunity. If he missed it, he might not have another chance to reverse the tide. Under tremendous pressure, Lin Yun pushed himself to the limit and calculated every detail. Even in an ordinary exchange of spells, Lin Yun would also calculate the variation of spells between both sides. This is a fight where no mistakes were allowed. It was fortunate that Lin Yun's magic conducting rune was the magic array. Along with his repertoire of spells of an entire era, this gave Lin Yun the capital to confront an abnormal existence like Kain. But it was only to the level withstanding the fight. Indeed, at first, the Heaven's Fall meteor made Kain feel somewhat surprised, even giving Lin Yun the initiative, but as the Book of Death's incarnation, his grasp on spells was far superior to that of Lin Yun, who came from the end of the magic era. With each passing second, Lin Yun was losing his initial advantage. Then, the fight sank into a deadlock. One was a human from the future, one was the incarnation of the extraordinary Book of Death. They kept switching between offense and defense, showing that this was truly an evenly matched battle. At this time, even a true extraordinary realm powerhouse might not be able to determine the winner between the two of them. No mistakes, no negligence, all the details were almost perfect. That fight lasted for a full 3 hours. Lin Yun and Kain might have never thought that the victory would actually be decided by a wind blade. Yes, a wind blade. After a 3-hour-long fight, the spells used by both sides had been of lower and lower levels, from 8th tier to 7th tier, from 7th to 6th, 6th to 5th. By the time their mana reached their limits, these two with the power of archmages actually used first-rank spells to keep fighting. In the end, Lin Yun used a wind blade to cut Kain's throat. When he finally fell, Kain's face was filled with disbelief. As a peak archmage realm powerhouse, he had been ended by a wind blade. This was simply the greatest joke. Even if they both had little mana remaining in their bodies, it was impossible for an archmage to be knocked down by a wind blade. Even the most basic mana shield should be able to block a few dozen wind blades. But regretfully, Kain didn't have the slightest bit of mana remaining when Lin Yun's wind blade lightly flew out and softly cut his throat. "I did tell you earlier, you spoke too soon." Lin Yun looked at the collapsed Kain and panted as he muttered a few words. In the end, before Lin Yun's words finished, the black wasteland disappeared and the entire world collapsed. It twisted at first before exploding into countless fragments. By the time Lin Yun recovered, he was already back in the Bony Hall. His experience in the black wasteland, his long and strenuous battle seemed to have lasted a split second in the outside world. But at this time, Lin Yun didn't have the time to think, and he directly grabbed the Book of Death. At the same time, he used Elemental Incarnation and a Flame Path, before immediately following with Flame Flash, instantly leaving the hall. Before he even touched the ground, he cast haste and used a shocking speed to flee. An angry dragon's roar echoed behind him as the entire Bone Peak shook. A frightening aura of dragon might spread everywhere, but Lin Yun couldn't care about it anymore. While frantically fleeing, he opened the Book of Death.